Students, this is a video to help you through the notes for Utah's struggle to statehood. So let's start off here in our Canvas module. There's an assignment called Statehood Notes right here. If you click on that, it opens up a guide that looks like this. I always recommend opening up in its own tab, so yours should look like this. I'm going to go through this slideshow that is linked right here to guide you through the answers that you will need for this assignment. So please follow along, fill out the boxes here. Now remember, even though you have this PowerPoint, if you're copying and pasting the answers, you're not really getting the information. It doesn't help you, so just don't do it. Thanks, guys. Okay, here we are. Moving on to Utah's struggle for statehood. Utah's struggle for statehood. Utah at one time wanted to be a big state. This is actually a sized down version. Brigham Young wanted the state to be much, much larger. If you do a quick Google image search of the state of Deseret, you will see some images like this. This is the original idea that Brigham Young had for the state of Deseret. Now, it got shrunk down to this size at one point, and then by the time Utah became a state in 1896, it was down to the one that we know of today, our six-sided state here with a little notch chuck out at the top. Now, let's go back to our notes. The first thing on our notes asks us to describe the difference between a territory and a state. Now remember, we still have some territories now, so it's important for us to understand what the importance of being a state in the United States is. Here we go. Here's the struggle for statehood. Why become a state? Well, in a territory, you are an inferior citizen, meaning you are not a full citizen for some reason, such as you cannot vote. You don't get to vote for president. You don't get to vote for representatives or judges, and that puts you at a huge disadvantage. You don't get a member in the House of Representatives. This is representation. You can have representatives, but they don't get to vote. So even though they can go talk to people, they don't get to vote themselves, which is most of the power. You have 0 senators as well, same thing. Judges are appointed for you instead of electing your own judges. Now, as a state, it's pretty much the opposite of this. You're a full citizen. You can vote, not just for president, but for everything else. You get a member in the House of Representatives, which means you have a voice representing you. You can have reps and they can vote. There is 2 senators, just like every other state, and you get to elect your own judges. Also, besides that, as a territory, you don't get to write your own constitution. You're really just up to the country. There's no power over education, and the territory does not pay taxes. Now that could be, you could consider that a positive, but the negative is that you don't receive taxes. For government services such as parks, roads, firefighters, schools, anything else that especially the federal government does. Now as a state, you get to write your own constitution. You have power over education. You do pay taxes, but then because of you paying those taxes, you also receive government services. When we were applying for statehood, Utah applied 6 times to become a state. Once in 1849, 1856, 1862, 1872, 1882, and 1887. Each time the U.S. government said no. So, because of this, Congress had heard a lot of stories that made Utah not want to allow Utah to become a state. So just so you guys remember, we are trying to fill out these notes here. We've moved beyond why become a state, and moved on to applying for statehood. How many times? I just answered that. Please fill it out. And what was Utah originally be called? I kind of covered that in the intro. So if you don't get that, rewind this video and play it back. Next up, how did Utah get its shape? Kind of discussed that as well. So write that there as well. 7 roadblocks to statehood is what we're covering next. Here we go. Congress had heard a lot of stories that made them not want to become. How Utah got its shape. If you want to click this video, it is under yours. It's a great video. I'm not going to show it on this video because it's a video within a video. Weird. Okay, next up, 7 roadblocks. These are roadblocks that you will need to be able to learn and describe on the test. Number 1, unity. Unity is this idea where you need to separate religion and government. According to our Constitution, we have a separation of church and state. That helps distribute power in people's lives. We've discussed that in class. It's something that's really important to the way our country runs. The LDS liked having economy, government, and religion be closely tied together. That is not how it works in the United States. You'll recognize as we go through some of these other roadblocks, it has a lot to do with this idea of unity or separation of church and state. Now, another big thing is majority rules. Now, majority rules works out great if you're the majority, but if you're the minority, it doesn't work out as great. Utahns believed in this majority rules, and for them, it works out really well, but for everyone else, it doesn't. The non-LDS began their own party to try to rule, but it didn't really work because they were in the minority. They felt like their vote didn't count. This was a problem as the LDS pioneers traveled through many states in that they would vote in these blocks, and it continued to follow them into Utah. And this was, again, another reason why religion and government needed to be separate. Next reason, number 3, courts. Now remember, we're filling this out here. I'm giving you this information. You need to fill it out. Courts. LDS would go to their religious leader, a bishop, when there's a problem instead of the government court. This works out for people here. Now, just as we've talked about bias, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but a bishop is going to side with the person that is LDS. The non-LDS said there was no justice in a Mormon court, and that's because of that inherent bias from the bishop, which isn't, again, that's pretty normal. Next roadblock to statehood is economics. LDS only went to stores that were run by LDS people, wanting to support their community. Although that appears to be great for LDS, it doesn't help the non-LDS businesses. So they thought it was unfair. 5th roadblock is education. LDS schools included religious instruction as well as other subjects. They also charged tuition. Protestant schools accepted everyone, and they wanted free schools that were paid for by taxes. But remember, you can't have religion and government be the same thing. So LDS schools and Protestant schools needed to be separated. You can't have a public school that teaches a specific religion because then you don't separate church and state. Next, we have immigration. LDS sent out missionaries and converted many people. And as those people moved to Utah to be part of this communal religion, thousands come. The non-LDS didn't like immigrants. And many of those immigrants kind of came in through ways that other immigrants didn't. It wasn't necessarily illegal because immigration was a bit different back then. But that was the number 6 roadblock. Next, immigrants would also take jobs in good land, which, I mean, obviously would be an issue for many. And last, and the biggest roadblock, polygamy. This is the practice of having more than one wife, polygamy. It's polygamy. Next, some LDS leaders practice polygamy. Many LDS leaders practice polygamy. It wasn't accepted by the rest of the country. It was illegal according to the Moral Anti-Bigamy Act. So you couldn't have a bunch of leaders practicing this when it was clearly illegal according to the federal government. It was against non-LDS religious beliefs. So many Christian religions were very much against this idea, hence the passing of this anti-bigamy. Bigamy means bi, means multiple or two. The LDS thought that it should be covered by the First Amendment, freedom of religion, but it was the biggest roadblock because it was illegal. Statehood. Utah became, the LDS ended polygamy in 1890 due to the manifesto passed by the then LDS church president. I publicly declare that my advice to the Latter-day Saints is to refrain from contracting any marriages forbidden by the law of the land, is what Wilford Woodruff said. And then after 1890, the LDS no longer practiced polygamy. The president of the U.S., Grover Cleveland, allowed Utah to write a constitution. So, due to the ending of polygamy 6 years later, Utah becomes a state in 1896. So, you have a copy of these slides. You can do this assignment. If you don't do great on the test, we've got other ways to study through other assignments. If you have any questions, let me or your teacher know, and we would love to help you out. Have a great day.